it's finally here. Stephen Curtis Chapman has written his autobiography. It's called Between Heaven and the Real World, My Story. And we're here with him right now. Fantastic book. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Thank you for doing this. Now, after such a long career, why did you decide now to write your autobiography?
Yeah, that's a question I asked myself several times after I started the process. It was one of those like, what was I thinking? This is a lot harder than I thought. Yeah, and I think it's the reason why it took me 30 years into my career, actually, or 27. I started this about 3 years ago, actually. And, I think it was just, I had actually tried and toyed with the idea and flirted with the idea of writing my book and my story several times along the journey, and different publishers and folks had talked to me about it. And it always felt too soon somehow, that I wasn't at the right place to have the perspective to really be able to kind of step aside for a moment, take a breath, look back, and just see this journey that God has had me on, this great adventure, if you will. And I don't really know why. I think I knew I was coming up on 30 years, kind of marking, my first album came out in 1987. So maybe in some ways I thought that seems like there's kind of a milestone there. It's certainly not that I feel like I'm finished with the journey or crossing the finish line in any way, but it just, I think, perspective on the whole of the journey, and particularly the last 8 or 9 years, almost 9 years now, that obviously a lot of the book, hinges on, our story of loss with our family and our little girl, Maria. And it just felt like I was at a place, far enough into that journey to be able to really share some perspective that I wouldn't have had 2, 3, 4, or 5 years ago even. So I think that's really the reason why now. It just sort of all the timing of everything seemed like this was a good time for me to do this.
Such an intimate book. Really enjoyed reading it. People are going to love it because there are some moments when you are brought to tears, but there are moments that are just hilarious.
Yeah.
I got to admit, I laughed out loud reading some of your stories.
Good. Good. I'm loving hearing this, because these are all the things that you hope when you're writing it, but then you kind of get away from it, and I come back and I go, I don't know, is that dumb? Is that gonna, are people gonna think that's funny? Because it was really funny when it happened. So I'm glad to know you laughed out loud. That's good.
Well, I did, especially when you're talking about how your relationship with your wife developed, and just you're very open about how that you talked about a lot of stuff that I'm thinking, wow. I mean, those are some great conversations to have, and your heart and her heart through all of this is just, you want to live a life that is awesome for Jesus. Can I say it that way? And everything you do, your stories from the Grammys were just amazing, and some of the stuff you've gone through. What was, we know the hardest parts to write. What were the easiest ones to write?
I was really surprised once I got into the process. It was very hard starting the process, and then as a songwriter, I rewrite every song about at least 5 or 6 times, because I'm always going back through every line going, there could be something better. There's a better word for that. There's a better, and that's with like a 100-word song. Right. What am I going to do with a 100,000-word book? I can't do that, or it's going to be 40 years later. Here's it'll be long after I'm gone. Here's Stephen's book. So I had to find a different rhythm for that, and to begin to let. That's just the way it came out. That's the way, and I'm not going to sit there and pour over it and go, there's a better word for, the sky was dark. No, it was cloudy. No, it was, it was ominous. No, that's a good word. Like I can't do that. So I just have to say the sky was dark, But I think once I began to get into that flow, I found, telling the stories, obviously there were very difficult stories to share, the deeper stories of our loss and the pain. But really telling a lot of the story of my wife and our meeting and our beginning our journey together, and getting to remember that again, that's part of what, the blessing of getting to write this book. Hopefully it encourages other people, and it's a blessing in that way to them. But it was a great gift to me to just have the opportunity to sit and remember those stories. I kind of fell in love with my wife again, just retelling the stories, of how we first met, in those early, months and even years that were sometimes amazing, sometimes very hard and difficult. But I think that was, it just sort of, that part especially really flowed pretty naturally.
And you go even further back than that with your relationship with your dad, and that's a chapter that really touched me about the words that were spoken even back then and how you carried them forward in your life. Very, very raw, very intimate, and thanks for sharing some of those. Like that was probably the most difficult one for me to read.
Really?
And you mentioned that you're a fixer, and you were born for that.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you do. Describe what that means, that you're a fixer.
Well, I talk about in the book, I was born into a wonderful family, but wonderfully broken as well. My mom and dad, who started out their journey together with not much chance of surviving and making it. My mom was 16, my dad was 19. They were kids, and my brother came along very early, and they were actually at a point of not knowing if their marriage was going to make it. And and I had known this for a lot of years. They had told me, well, yeah, you were literally conceived, at a point where we were deciding, do we chuck this, or maybe we should have another child, maybe that'll help. So, I knew that I was kind of born into that, but writing my story allowed me to kind of even explore that a little more and realize, I was kind of born to save the day, for them. And I did in a way. I came in, I was a compliant child. I, smiled all the time. I was happy. I did, kind of all the things that, I think I knew that they needed in a way. And God was at work in all that too. It wasn't, wasn't anything false or fake about it. That was the way I was wired. But there was also, with that came, that expectation that, okay, your assigned role is you're supposed to fix what's broken. And so, do that and everything will be okay. That works for a while until you begin to realize, wait a minute, this world is broken. Mm-hmm. I'm broken. Yeah. This woman I'm married to now, once I get into marriage, is broken. And our brokenness combined together, the sum of that is not good. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a lot of things that are just unfixable. And I hate that word. That word really drives me crazy because I'm supposed to fix it. If there's somebody in pain, I need to move in there and fix it. And yet, as I get to talk about in great detail in my story, what I've found is that it's actually those broken places that I can't fix, and the most unfixable places I've encountered in my life, be it in my work with orphans and my wife and I adopting 3, but also confronted with there are millions more that aren't going to be adopted. It's going into death row prison cells with Chuck Colson and in these stories of brokenness that aren't going to be redeemed until heaven, and yet experiencing forgiveness and freedom in the hearts of these men behind bars. Or it's going into the jungles of Ecuador where missionaries were killed trying to take the gospel, and yet I'm experiencing the gospel in the most powerful ways I've ever experienced it. I started to realize, even in telling my story, that it's those most broken places and unfixable places where God has shown up in the most powerful ways in my life. So
we don't like them though.
No, I'd still fix them if I could. I'd still re-script it and go, well, and then this happened, and they all lived happily ever after.
Wow, that was easy. Yeah. It doesn't happen like that. Stephen Curtis Chapman, Between Heaven and the Real World, My Story. It's out now. It's fantastic. Get yourself a copy. It's awesome. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. Great to be with you. Thank you, guys.